Genesis chapter 20. We have been going through the life of Abraham, and last Wednesday night we saw what happened with Lot. For chapter 18, we find that Abraham has prayed for Lot. He has interceded for his family, and Abraham thought for sure there were 10 righteous folks. I really believe that Abraham thought there would be 10 righteous people. There was not. We saw the destruction that came upon the city of Sodom and Gomorrah. And so we understand all those things here. But now we're back from Lot. We're back on to Abraham. And I'm not sure why Abraham moves, but you'll see here in verse 20 and verse 1, and Abraham journeyed from thence toward the south country, and dwelled between Kadesh and Shur, and sojourned in Gerar. There's a couple of things that come to mind. One, he was a farmer. He had lots of cattle and sheep and such, and so probably maybe he needed fresh forage for them. That's definitely a possibility. Another possibility is this here, is that every time Abraham would get up, he'd see that city, or he'd see the ruins of the city, and be reminded of the ruin of his nephew Lot. I'm not sure which one it is. I mean, both seem feasible to me, but whatever the case is, he takes the time and he moves the camp and all the animals and everything. They're heading down to the south country, to Gerar, and so they're going to go down there. But as they get in there, Abraham goes back to his old ways. How in the world do you go back to your old ways after having a face-to-face conversation with God, and Him telling you at this time next year? That was chapter 18. Yeah. At this time next year, you're going to have a son. And Sarah is going to bear that son. Now, keep that in mind. They're going down to Gerar, and as they're getting down there, Abraham says, all right, we're coming to a new country. They don't know what's around here. I need you to do me a favor. Tell them that you are my sister. Okay. She's 90 years old, right? Surely there's not going to be a problem this time. However, you read in other parts of the Bible tells us that God actually turned back the clock on Sarah so that she'd be able to have that boy. It's like the first time oil of Olay has shown up in our Bible. She's looking younger because God is doing different things. In fact, Romans chapter 4 tells us that God took Abraham, who was as good as dead, and made him alive again. All of a sudden, he's back to his strength in his 30s or 40s or whatever. I mean, he's back there. And here's Sarah. And so he said, now, and I don't know if Abraham's watching this happen each morning. He's waking up. He's like, boy, that oil of Olay is really working on you. Now look, we're going to go down this new country, and I need you to let them know that you're my sister again. Abraham, what are you doing? What are you doing? God made a promise to you. You can trust God, right? God's not going to let anything happen to you. God has made a promise to you, but Abraham goes back to this here. Now, let's go over this again. Was Abraham lying? No. Technically, don't you just how you love doing that sometimes? I read one man said this here. He said, a half-truth has just enough fact in it to make it plausible and just enough deception to make it dangerous. Yeah. Well, there's some truth in there, but there's also some lie that is in there as well. I like what our court system says. When you take the stand, do you promise to tell the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth? So help you God. I don't know if they do that last part anymore or not, but I know those first three parts are still asked for. You know why? Because they know you could tell the truth without giving the whole truth. That's what Abraham was doing. Was she his sister? Technically, yes. But she was his wife. So they go down into this land once again, and here it is. Sarah agrees to go along. Remember, they did this back when they went to Egypt. How did that work out? We're still paying for that one. Okay? Listen, it did not work out well at all. And yet here Abraham is going back to this. And so he says, would you do this for me again? And so he says, so she agrees to do it. And so Abimelech sees her and is like, wow, she's nice looking. I want to take her in to be a part of my harem. And so he takes her in. He marries her. Whoa, now we got a problem. We got a big issue. Because what did God promise Abraham and Sarah? Next year. So what if Abimelech comes into her? Well, whose son is it then? Oh, see, all of a sudden we got a question. You understand, what he is doing is unwittingly, he is undermining the plan of God for his own life. He doesn't realize what is going on. He realizes what's going on, but he doesn't take into consideration the long-term effects. Sometimes we're so quick to try to take care of the here and now that we forget that there are consequences to every decision that we make, and not thinking about the consequences down the road. He says, let's take the easy way out, and that's what he wants to do. And so Abimelech takes her to him. But notice here in verse 3, but God came to Abimelech in a dream by night. How'd you like that? You go to bed tonight. It's going to be, we're looking for sweet sleep. And all of a sudden, God comes to you in a dream and says, hey, Buster, you lay a finger on that woman, you're a dead man. We talk about getting woken out of your sleep. I mean, God himself comes to him and he says, she's already married. And notice here, Abimelech had not come near her. And he said, Lord, wilt thou slay a righteous nation? Said he not unto me, she is my sister. And she herself said, he is my brother. In the integrity of my heart and innocency of my hands have I done this. Wow. The heathen has a better testimony than what the righteous do. What a terrible, terrible thing. God says, I know, verse 6, I know that thou didst this in the integrity of thine heart. And for I also withheld thee from sinning against me, therefore suffered I thee not to touch her. Catch these next few words. Now therefore restore the man his wife, for he's a prophet. He's my man. He represents me. But God, he lied to me. The man of God lied to me. I know, and that's why I wouldn't let you do anything. But as I've read through this so many times, and I've looked at it and I study, I'm always amazed. I always have a hard time getting through this part, because how often does the ungodly, how often does the wicked, how often does the world say, but I thought you were a man of God. I thought you were a Christian. Sometimes it's the world that knows better what a Christian is supposed to act like than what even us Christians do. What a terrible testimony. One, to the world, but two, Abraham, you're trying to mess up God's plan. Not only for your life, but do you understand that it would affect us? Because the promised seed was to come through Abraham and Sarah. Oh my. You say, well, it's not a big deal. It doesn't matter what it matters what you do. And you have no idea how far-reaching the effects of your decision can be. Abraham was about to affect millions of people, but he was only concerned about him. That's the way selfishness works. Abimelech gets up, like in verse 8. Abimelech rose early in the morning. You're not kidding. I'm not waiting for, I'm up before dawn on this one. We're getting this taken care of right away. Calls all of his servants, says, don't touch him, don't touch her. We're getting them out of here. I don't want anything to do with them. God came to me in a dream. He threatened to kill me. No, we don't want that. He tells his servants, keep your hands to yourself. Then he brings in Abraham in verse 9. Then Abimelech called Abraham and said unto him, what hast thou done unto us? What have I offended thee? That thou hast brought on me and on my kingdom a great sin. Thou hast done deeds unto me that ought not to be done. What sawest thou? Thou hast done this thing. And here's Abraham's response. Because I thought, well, there's our first problem. Abraham's making some assessments here that he wasn't founded in good faith. Surely the fear of God is not in this place, and they will slay me for my wife's sake. And yet indeed she is my sister. She is the daughter of my father. So I'm trying to get myself off the hook. I really didn't lie to you. I just didn't tell you the whole truth, that's all. But not the daughter of my mother, and she became my wife. And it came to pass, when God caused me to wander from my father's house, that I said to her, this is thy kindness which thou shalt show. So he gives them the whole story. Abimelech took sheep and oxen, men, servants, so on, restored Abraham his wife. Abimelech, behold, my land is before thee, dwell here. But amazingly enough, he's kind to him still. Nearly got him killed. In verse 16, and unto Sarah he said, behold, I have given thy brother 1,000 pieces of silver. Behold, he is to thee a covering of the eyes unto all that are with thee, and with all other. Thus she was reproved. And Abraham prayed unto God, and God healed Abimelech and his wife and his maidservants, and they bare children. For the Lord had fast closed up all the wombs of the house of Abimelech because of Sarah, Abraham's wife. These terrible things have taken place because the man of God, the man who's supposed to represent God, the man who's supposed to be God's servant, has come in and has lied to this man. In the process, he's nearly gotten him killed. He's had his entire house has not been able to have children. He has taken away all these blessings from him, all because he lied to this man. Tonight, I want to give us here quickly just 7 principles. 7 principles from this here that I think we all need to understand here. Number 1 tonight, understand this here. Just because you are saved and just because you are mature in your faith, it doesn't mean you won't have to battle sin. Until the day you die, you will battle sin. The Apostle Paul cried out to the Lord, who shall deliver me from this body of death? I hate this body that I'm in. I hate this sin that I'm always constantly. Listen, understand that every morning you wake up, you don't get a break from sin today. You don't get a break from Satan coming at you and tempting you and trying to get you to make a wrong decision and try to react in a bad way or to try to make something that's going to affect not only yourself but your family and for others around you, your friends. Listen, every day sin comes at us and we've got to be prepared and ready. That's why God tells us to take on the armor of God. That's why Paul said, I die daily. Why? Because it's a daily battle. It doesn't matter where you're at. If you've been saved for a week or if you've been saved for 100 years, you're still going to deal with sin. And it doesn't matter how close. Listen, you could get up this morning and have the sweetest walk with the Lord that you've ever had in your life, and by the afternoon, well, I mean, she's my sister. Liar. Liar, liar. Robe on fire. I don't know if he's wearing pants or not. But listen, think with me. He just face to face with God. God, please spare Lot and his family. God, please spare that city for Lot. If there's 10 righteous, Abraham, Abraham, if I find 10, I'll spare that city. And the Bible says that God communed with Abraham. The next morning, the cities are burned because he couldn't find 10 righteous. The day after that, Abraham's moving the family down to Gerar, and before you know it, before the week is out, she's my sister. It doesn't matter how good you've had it with God, your sinful flesh is waiting for one opportunity. Yeah. The old devil knows how to exploit it on us too. We got to be careful. Just because you're saved, just because you have a wonderful walk with the Lord, it doesn't mean you're not going to have to battle sin. You got to be ready every day. Number 2, don't let Satan scare you into compromising what God has promised to you. Don't let Satan scare you into compromising what God has promised to you. I think it's 2 Timothy chapter 1, verse 7. See, 2 Timothy or 1 Timothy, I think it's 2 Timothy 1:7. The Bible says this here, that God hath not given us the spirit of fear. Okay, if God hasn't given it to us, then who gives it to us? If it's not God, there's only one other choice. We're in a spiritual warfare, and if God does not give us a spirit of fear, that means the spirit of fear comes from Satan, right? Why did Abraham ask Sarah to tell them that she was his sister and that he was going to tell everybody that he was her brother? Why? Because I thought surely they will fear. And what does Satan get him to do? Satan got Abraham to think here that I'm going to get killed for this here, and I don't want to die today, and so I'll give them a lie, and he nearly compromised. He nearly messed up God's plan. Now, I don't believe God was going to let him happen. We see that in chapter 20, that God kept that man from doing anything to Sarah. It was God. It was God's mercy. Thank God for His mercy that covers so much of our stupidity. Thank God for that. But listen, sometimes we let Satan convince us that God doesn't have our best. No, you're wrong. God always has our best. And listen, God is going to take care of us. If it was God's will for Abraham to go off the scene at this time, so be it. But it wasn't God's plan. God had told him, next year you're going to have a boy. How can you have a boy if you're dead? Son, listen, think about things here. We let Satan sometimes get in our minds and gets us to compromise what God has promised to us. God has your best. Don't let Satan steal from you the blessing of God. Yeah. He almost accomplished it. Number three, trust God, even when you don't think He will come through for you. Trust God, even when you don't think He will come through for you. I like what David said in the Psalms. He said, once was I young, and now am I old. And yet, I've never seen the righteous forsaken. I've never seen God not come through for His people. I have yet to see God fail His people. Listen, we have this issue sometimes. We think, God, well, I don't know if God's going to come through. God always comes through. You know who fails? I'm not always faithful like I'm supposed to be. But I love what the Bible tells us, yet He remaineth faithful. God has never failed us one time yet. He will always be there. He is true to His word. He is better at keeping His promises than we are. We sometimes think God is like us. That God, well, I know He made that promise, but, no, God always keeps His promises. And you can trust Him. God made a promise to Abraham and Sarah that by this time next year, you're going to have a boy. You're going to name him Isaac. He's going to be the son of promise. He's going to be that seed that the Messiah is going to come through. You trust me on this here. I know it seems impossible to you, but I'm going to do it. And here they go. The next week, he tries to ruin everything. Because why? He didn't trust God. Well, I don't see how God's going to do that. I don't see how God's... Just trust Him. Just trust Him. He's always been faithful. Number 4, don't assume the worst about people. Don't assume the worst about people. Right here he says, well, I thought surely they're going to kill me because there's no fear of God in this place. What made you think that? Well, they don't hang out with me, so they must not be like me, and so they must kill all Christians. Why do we assume the worst? Sometimes we see somebody, we assume, boy, that guy looks rough. I bet he's probably out there saving puppies. You're thinking the worst of something. We have that tendency. We put people in a certain category of you dress this way, you look this way. Making me think of that as you were talking to in the elevator. There down in Arkansas there, Brother Jeff met a couple of guys who were biker dudes. They had a cross down here on their vest, Jesus saves. They're following all these biker gangs around, giving the gospel to them. But just taking one quick look at him, you're like, oh, I don't want to get in the elevator with them. They'll kill me before I get to the bottom floor. That's Abraham. That's exactly what Abraham was doing. Don't assume the worst about people. Let them prove it. 90% of the time you'll find that it's not true what you're thinking. But it is that other 10% you got to watch out for. Number five, don't continue to hold on to and reuse old lies. Hebrews chapter 12 talks about this. And it is this here. It says that let us lay aside every weight and the sin. God doesn't put words in the Bible on accident. The sin that doth so easily beset us. Every one of us in this room, we have a besetting sin. There is something that will trip us up 10 out of 10 times if we're not keeping the guard up and watching. You know what Abraham's was? This is the amazing thing. Abraham is known as there's more verses in the Bible about Abraham on faith. When you get to Hebrews chapter 11, more said about Abraham, about faith, and yet what was it that kept tripping Abraham up? A lack of faith. He lied in Egypt. Why? Lost faith. Why did he go to Egypt? He lost faith. Why did he lie to this man here, Abimelech here? Because he lost faith. It's amazing how this is the one thing that keeps showing up in Abraham's life. It's a besetting sin. Be watchful. Be careful. Your besetting sin is probably not my besetting sin. I know guys who you get them anywhere near the bar, they start shaking. They haven't had a drink in 10 years and they got saved, they haven't had a drink, but man, you get them around that stuff, there's something that just draws them. And I don't know what it is for you, but here's what I know. I can go into any bar, liquor store, whatever. I don't have the slightest, not even one iota desire to even pick the stuff up. My dad threatened me when I was a kid, told me he would kill me if that ever happened. And I believed him. I still believe him. But there's nothing in this body that craves that stuff. There's nothing in this body that wants to go out and stick a needle in these veins. And I have no desire. And I know there are good men. Listen, there's a young man that's coming to mind right now he struggles with that. He gets around the wrong guys. He falls back in that stuff just that fast. We all have a besetting sin. There are things that they get thrown out of me. And I crash and burn. It feels like every single time. I get up and, man, I get so aggravated and angry with myself that how did you let that happen again? Now, that's the way I feel. It's besetting sin. Man, we got to be watchful for those things. Number 6, I need to move quickly here. Your sin would not only have consequences for you, but may bring unintended consequences for others. Sarah nearly has an affair with a man because her husband told her to. Abimelech, totally unrelated to Abraham, suddenly his whole household is sick and they have these problems where they cannot have children now. Why? Because of Abraham's lie. That's what it was. And he affected it. Did you notice here that Abimelech, he chastised him? He said, "You've affected my entire kingdom? You've done all this to me? Why? Why would you do this?" Your sin has much further effects than what we never realize how great the effect our sin is. The Bible warns us in Galatians chapter 6, "Be not deceived, God is not mocked, for whatsoever a man soweth, that shall he also reap." Put a kernel of corn in the ground, how many kernels do you reap? That's a lot of kernels. But it was only one kernel I put in the ground. but it produces a whole lot more. I love green beans. I love green beans fresh from the garden.
Yeah.
There's nothing better than fresh green beans straight from the garden, thrown something, get in the pot and cook them up. There's nothing better than that. But I'll put one bean in the ground, and for all summer I'm going out and I'm picking beans off, picking beans off, picking beans off. It's just constantly producing, all from one bean. You have no idea. You have no idea. We got to be mindful that, listen, Satan understands us better than we understand ourselves. And he wants us to endure those terrible consequences. Last thing, number 7, don't let the world have a better testimony than you. There is nothing in this passage that indicates Abimelech worshiped God. Maybe he did, but there's nothing that indicates that. The only indication that we have he has any relationship is that God shows up to him in a dream and he calls him Lord. I don't know. Maybe he did know the Lord. Maybe he did have a relationship with him. But we don't know. But we know this here, that whenever Abraham walked into this area, he's like, these people are heathens. He could look around. How did Abraham know? He came from a heathen land. He recognized it. There was a certain way the culture was. And so he would understand the gods they would have, and he would understand the heathen people. And yet, who had the better testimony? God, in the integrity of my heart, in the innocency of my hands, Lord, I was trying to be right. I was trying to do things right. I know you were, Abimelech. And I'm sorry, my prophet over here did not. Boy, I hope that one day when we get to heaven, and I don't know how things will go at the great white throne judgment, but if we are there, we're in one of those thrones there around the throne of God, or one of those seats around the throne of God, and we're there watching these people coming and being judged, and somebody that we know makes eye contact with us and says, "What? You're a Christian? Well, I would have never guessed by the way you talked. I would have never guessed by the way you lived your life. I thought you were just like us. I thought, in fact, you were a little worse than us." Boy, what a terrible testimony, huh? Well, let's not let the world have a better testimony than us. I was talking with a man today, and he was sharing with me how a particular fellow that he knew, he said he would build houses for people, do some building work, stuff like that. And he said he knew of this man. He said that if they refused to pay him at the end, he would not get upset. He would not bring a lawyer in. He would not put a lien against their property or anything. He would just let it go. Happened to him a couple times. I remember telling him, I told him, I said, I would have a hard time doing that. I just spent all my time here and my labor putting this thing up here and buying all that's necessary to build this guy a barn or a house or whatever he's after. And then at the end of the thing here, he says, "I'm not going to pay you." He says, "I know." He said, "But I have it on good authority from, this so-and-so told me about this happening to him." And he said, "Okay," and just moved on. Wow. I went out there thinking, thought, man, God, how would I handle that? Would somebody like that have a better testimony than me? I hope not. Boy, God, get me to the place where somebody in the world would have a better testimony. I don't want to have that happen. Lord, help me to be what you need me to be. Well, these are challenging things. But just looking at this here, a great man of God, a great man of faith, and yet he was guilty of these things. I'm no Abraham, which means I could end up in this same list. Let's be watchful. Let's keep our heart with all diligence. Let's be sober. Let's be vigilant. The Bible tells in the book of Ephesians to walk circumspectly. Satan's going to come around the corner. He's waiting. Let's not let him get a chance. Let's be watchful. Father.